This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. As we turn now to Texas, where the first primary of the 2022 midterm elections kicked off Monday with early voting and a highly restrictive voting law in effect. On Monday, 30 civil rights groups sent a letter to the Texas Secretary of State calling for stronger action to ensure voters have access to the ballot leading up to the March 1st primary. Measures enacted by Republican lawmakers under the state's Senate Bill 1 have already caused problems for Texas voters, with local election officials reportedly rejecting a high number of mail-in ballots that lack newly required ID information. Texas already has strict rules for voting by mail, but under SB 1, voters must now include a state identification number like a driver's license number or a partial Social Security number, both when they request a mail-in ballot and when they return their completed ballot. The place to include the ID is underneath the envelope flap, and apparently it's easy to miss. The new ID rules had already led to thousands of rejected ballot requests, and now officials say they're facing high rates of faulty ballots. In Houston, Harris County, some 40% of the ballots, nearly 4 in 10, have been rejected due to a missing ID number. In Dallas, more than 25%, about 28%, more than a quarter of the ballots have been rejected. For more, we go to Austin to speak with Anthony Gutierrez. He is Executive Director of Common Cause Texas. We welcome you to Democracy Now! Can you lay out the issues right now, what the bill does and what's happening to people who want to vote and participate in elections?
Sure, I can. Yeah, and thank you for having me. So first of all, there is a lot in SB 1. I can talk about some of the issues that we're seeing now and then some of the issues we're looking out for, but I mean, it's a lot to unpack. You hit on the big one that we're seeing so far related to vote by mail. The problem there is not just that there's a field that is underneath the flap of an envelope. The problem is they are also asking you to put either your driver's license number or the last 4 of your Social Security number, and whichever number it is, has to be the same number that you originally used on your voter registration form when you first registered. I mean, for me, that was, I don't know, 18 years ago, probably. Like, for most of us, we probably don't remember what we had for lunch 3 days ago, but you're supposed to remember which one of those numbers you used when you first registered to vote. That is why we are seeing these ridiculous rejection rates of 30 to 40%, not just on the applications, but also on the vote by mail ballots themselves. There are ways for people to cure the ballot if they make a mistake on there. But, I mean, it really comes down to time, and are people going to have enough time to go take a phone call from the elections office and figure out what exactly they need to do when they go back and get their ballot cured. Beyond that one, we also saw there was, in SB 1, there was a criminal penalty that was increased for false voter registration. Now, the implementation error here by the Secretary of State was they were telling people the only voter registration forms we can distribute to you are the ones that have this new language on them. So because they were demanding, like, this specific thing has to be in the fine print, that meant for organizations like the League of Women Voters, they were only able to request and receive maybe 50 voter registration applications, even though they were going to be going to, like, you know, like naturalization ceremonies where you register hundreds of people at a time. And this was also, people may have heard, there was a quote unquote paper shortage that the Secretary of State was citing, which really seemed to only affect voter registration forms in Texas. I mean, every other southern state was offering, like, we have paper if y'all for some reason need paper for your voter registration. But now early voting started yesterday. What we're watching now, one of the big ones that was in Senate Bill 1 was a really dangerous empowerment of partisan poll watchers. If folks don't know what a poll watcher is, this is someone that's appointed by a campaign or a political party. They get to stand inside the poll site, and they're supposed to just watch operations. If they see something they think is improper or illegal, they can talk to the election judge. In Texas, we have seen a long history of poll watchers being used for nefarious purposes. In Harris County, for several election cycles, we've seen right-wing extremist groups recruiting and training white poll watchers to go down to black and brown poll sites in minority areas and really just kind of be intimidating to disrupt operations, to get too close to voters. And what the bill does is allow them now sort of free reign inside the poll site to be able to walk around a lot more. They're allowed to get near enough to voters to see and hear conversations with election judges. And there's all kinds of new complicated rules as far as what an election judge must do if they want to remove a disruptive poll watcher from the poll site. So there's a lot more. Those are a few of the top concerns that I have regarding SB1 and how it's affecting voting in Texas today.
Yeah, and Anthony Gutierrez, could you talk about also the provision of SB1 that declares it a crime to encourage unsolicited Texans to vote by mail? What's happened with that provision?
Right. So there was a recent court decision that put a halt on that piece. I mean, what the provision was prohibiting election officials from giving out too much information about how to vote by mail, and prohibiting them from proactively sending out vote-by-mail applications, which both of them, I feel like most people outside of Texas would hear that and just, be flummoxed. I mean, the idea that you're going to prohibit an election official from talking about voting in any sense, in any context, is just on its face absurd. But that's what happened. At the moment, that law is not in effect, but we shall see what happens. Texas, the state is surely appealing this.
We wanted to bring in another person into this conversation who is also participating in the March 1st primary. He is congressional candidate Greg Casar, who's running in an open primary in the 35th District. Former city council member in Austin. Monday, he was endorsed by Senator Bernie Sanders over the weekend. Congressmember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez campaigned in Texas for Casar, as well as Jessica Cisneros, who is challenging the anti-choice, pro-business Democratic Congressmember Henry Cuellar. I wanted to play a clip of AOC in Texas.
We have to make sure that this becomes a springboard for the state. That's why I'm here, for the long game, for the long haul. I don't care how many cycles it takes.
Greg Casar is a former labor organizer and Austin City Council member, currently running for Congress in Texas. If you can weigh in on what this restrictive law means for you in the March 1st primary and the significance of what's happening in Texas right now, the importance of this primary.
In this primary in Texas, we have a real opportunity for big progressive change here in the heart of the state, where we've seen so many oppressive laws be pushed through the pandemic. I, as a city council member, we're working hard alongside the community to try to keep people alive and save people's jobs and keep people from being evicted. But the legislature, instead of focusing on taking care of folks, people like Governor Abbott virtually banned abortion in our state, especially for low and moderate income people. They discriminated against immigrant communities and LGBTQ communities. And then they focused on keeping people from getting to the ballot box instead of keeping people alive. And so voters right now, I think, are so sick and tired of that status quo that there's a real opportunity for progressive change, not just in my congressional race, but in many congressional races here in Texas, to sort of set the stage for progressives in this first primary across the country. Because there's so much talk about this being, quote unquote, a bad year for progressive change. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I think here in Texas, we can set the stage and show that in the heart of where we're seeing such oppressive policy, people can turn out and vote and say that they're sick and tired of the status quo as we have it here in Texas.
And Greg Casar, speaking in terms of voting rights, could you talk about, especially in the congressional redistricting, Texas is a state where Latinos are nearly 40% of the entire population of the state. What happened with the redistricting, and how do you think that will affect the ability of the mass of voters to be heard this time around?
Yeah, Texas is not a red state, as you know, Juan. It is a under-organized state. It is a place where the vast majority of people believe in a $15 an hour minimum wage and guaranteed health care and Medicare for all. It's not a place where people want to continue these GoFundMe campaigns for people to be able to pay for life-saving care. It's a place where we have seen mostly growth in communities of color. But we didn't actually see new districts in redistricting for communities of color, especially the Latino community. But the answer to that, I believe, is not to just throw up our hands and give up. The answer to that is for folks to run for Congress in these seats, not just elect any old Democrats, but actual progressives who believe that we should pass voting rights laws, end the filibuster, and override these kinds of state restrictions like happened in the civil rights movement. That's what we need in Texas. We need progressive champions at the federal level to come and have our democracy work for us in the South.
And I wanted to ask you about an issue that you've been very vocal about, the fixing of the Texas power grid. This week marks 1 year since the terrible winter storm that wreaked so much damage in terms of power in Texas.
Yes, this is the 1 year anniversary of when I had constituents die here up in my neighborhood as a council member. There were people lighting their furniture on fire to stay warm, turning on their ovens and facing potential carbon monoxide poisoning. We were in the gym of the local high school right up the street from where I am right now. We were delivering blankets to seniors that we were pulling out of senior homes, delivering them blankets to keep them warm. Many people donating blankets from their homes that didn't have power themselves. And at the time, we had people like Senator Ted Cruz getting on a plane and going to the beach. And so this is a real moment in Texas where we can talk about the climate crisis. Here in the energy capital of the world, the lights went out, and we can actually not just see the climate crisis as theoretical, but it is here in our backyards. And so it's a moment for us as progressives to talk about how Texas should be interconnected with the rest of the country's power grid, why we have to invest in renewable energy and fight back against corporate power, because the legislature's response, the governor's response to that climate crisis was to write a bill that, quote unquote, fixed the grid, but left a huge loophole for natural gas suppliers who were the biggest contributors to this power grid failure. Right after that, some of the CEOs of the biggest natural gas supplier companies showed up with $1 million checks for the governor. And that's what people are sick and tired of, is the Republican status quo and, frankly, a corporate Democrat status quo that leaves us in the same place. We've seen with united Democratic control in D.C. that we can't just have any old Democrats elected, but actual folks that are going to step up against fossil fuel interests and protect good union jobs, transition folks to renewable energy, and prevent things like the future winter storms and fires and floods to come.
You and Jessica Cisneros have campaigned together. Can you talk about the redistricting that's led to you and your district? And, of course, as she's doing a re-challenge in hers.
Yes, here in Texas, we just underwent redistricting. They tried to make it so there would be no new Democratic seats in Texas, even though the vast majority of the growth here has been in communities of color, working class communities that reject the right-wing regime that we are under. And ultimately, it created the opportunity for one new open Democratic seat. Congressman Doggett, a longtime member of Congress here from the Austin area, chose to run in the new Western Democratic seat, leaving open my seat, which is a majority folks of color and working class communities packed into one district. Really, this district is meant to dilute the power of working class communities by putting so many voters into one district. And what we're trying to do is fight back against that dilution of power by organizing in this district and driving up turnout despite voter suppression. Then just south of my district, there's Henry Cuellar's district, where Jessica Cisneros is mounting a challenge. Again, a big an important primary where organizers and progressive organizations are all coming together.
Henry Cuellar, whose home was just raided by the FBI.
That's right. The dynamics of that race have really shifted. And there's a lot of people coming out and voting in the San Antonio area down to South Texas. And then there's a competitive race along the border, which Republicans are trying to sort of replay what they did in 2020 and see if they can make gains along the border. But the hope is that real economic populism and both paired with racial justice can hold that seat for a more progressive candidate.
Well, we want to thank you for being with us. Greg Casar, former labor organizer and Austin City Council member, currently running for Congress in Texas Congressional District 35. It is the first primary in the country of 2022. The whole country is watching. And we want to thank Anthony Gutierrez, Executive Director of Common Cause Texas. That does it for our show. Very happy belated birthdays to Messiah Rhodes, Brendan Allen, and Danielle Wu. Democracy Now! Currently accepting applications for Human Resources Manager. Check out the job at democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Stay safe. Wear a mask.